Forms authentication in ASP.NET MVC. We will implement forms authentication in several steps. In the first step, we will create a new ASP.NET MVC application and discuss how the application features are accessible without security. Next, we'll create a login model. Here, login model represents user login credentials such as username and password. Next, we'll create login controller and the actions required to perform login and logout actions. Next, we'll create login view. So this view will be presented to user whenever he has to provide his login credentials. After making the setup related to login, or after creating the environment required for login, we'll enable forms authentication in configuration file. Next, we'll apply security using Authorize Attribute. Next, we'll implement logout feature in application. Step 1. Create a new ASP.NET MVC application. Let's first open Visual Studio. Let's create a new project. Now here we have to select ASP.NET Web Application .NET Framework template. Click Next. Now let's give the project name as Forms Authentication Demo. And let's give the location. Here I am selecting from my system. I want to store it in D drive and ASP.NET MVC, and under YouTube I want to store this project. So I have selected this project and we have given the project name as Forms Authentication Demo. And now let's create it. Now it asks us for what type of application we want to create, right? Now here in this we have to select MVC. As we want to create MVC application, we need to select MVC. If you have to create any web API or any single page application or any other options or any other type of application, you have to select options accordingly. But in our case, we have to create MVC application, right? So let's go with MVC. And we don't need to configure HTTPS, so we can uncheck this one and we can click create. So now the project is getting created for us, the ASP.NET MVC application project. Right, project is created for us. Now let's execute the project and see what pages we have. Yeah, so this is the default application that is created for us whenever we create a project using MVC template. Here, if we observe, we are in home page, and if we click on about, it will take us to about view. If we click on contact, it will take us to contact view. So as we can notice here, all these three views are not secure. So though I have not logged in, I am able to access, I am able to see the content which is present as part of these views or pages. So now let us implement security so that once I log in, then only I will be able to access these views. Step 2, create login model. Let's implement login model first. For that purpose, under models, we have to create a class by name login model. plugin model.cs. So this login model represents user credentials. So as part of user credentials, we have to collect username and password. So for that purpose, let us define two string properties in this login model. String username. We'll define one more string password. Done. We have created login model with two fields, username and password. Step 3, create login controller and actions. Now it's time to create login controller and corresponding actions. For that, we have to go to controllers, and here under controllers, let's add a new controller. Here we have to take MVC5 controller empty. Let's give the controller name as login controller. Login controller. In this login controller, by default, we have an action by name index. Let us rename this one to login. So this login action is invoked when user requests for login. That means whenever user requests for authentication, this action will be invoked. Next, we'll define another action by name action result. Let's define another action with same name login, but here we'll take few parameters. Login model, here we'll use the newly defined model, login model. Comma string return URL. So I will explain the purpose of this return URL later, but for now let us take it like this. And this login action will be invoked whenever user enters credentials and clicks on login button. So this action needs to be a post action. For that purpose, we have to use HTTP post attribute. And inside this one, as part of this demo, what we'll do is, if the login model contains both username and password, then we'll consider that one as a valid login. You can go with the string operation, string dot is null or empty. And string dot is null or empty in case of password also. So if both username and password are not null, then we'll consider that user has entered valid credentials and redirect user to the requested URL. Return redirect, and here we'll pass return URL. And if the above condition gets failed, what we can do is that we have to return the same view. That means we have to return the same login view. So for that we can give like this. So if username and password both are present, we'll consider that user as a valid user and redirect him to the requested URL. Otherwise we'll keep him in the same page. So this is what we are doing in this, but what I would suggest you is here you need to implement user validation according to your requirement. That means if you want to validate user against database, you can do that one here, or if you want to validate user against any authentication service or validation service, so that logic you need to maintain here. And once the user is valid, then you can come here and you can set forms authentication dot set auth cookie, and we have to give the username here. Can give the username, and second parameter we can pass false. So this is most important. If we don't set this one, the framework will not consider that the request, or framework will not consider that the user is authenticated. Okay, so once the user is valid, then only we have to set this cookie. After that we have to redirect to the requested URL, and here the return URL is a URL which is requested by user. For example, if the user has requested for home contact, at that time this return URL will contain that particular home/contact. So if the user is not authenticated, if he tries to use or if he tries to access home contact, so at that time the user will be redirected to login page with home/contact as return URL, and whenever user enters login credentials and submits, as part of this action we'll receive that information in return URL parameter. Okay, and now we can use that parameter and redirect user to the requested page. So that is how return URL works. And we have implemented the methods or actions required for login. Now let's implement one more action which is needed for logout. Action logout, and it did not have any parameters. Okay, and let's keep this one as HTTP GET. And now here the first thing that we need to do is we have to sign out from or we have to sign out using forms authentication. Forms authentication dot sign out. We have to call this forms authentication dot sign out. That means the signed in user will be signed out whenever this line gets executed. So after user sign out, what we have to do is that we have to return him to login page. That's why we'll keep return view, and here we have to specify the view that we want to return, and in our case we want to return login view. Sorry, the return type has to be action result, right? Then it's fine. So now we have created the methods required for login and logout. Step 4, create login view. Now it's time to go and create login view. So for that purpose, what we have to do is, inside this login view, you can simply right click and say add view. So it gives us a pop-up. Inside this one, it is asking for view name. So let's keep the view name as it is, like login, and the template will, let us take the template as create, and we'll take the model class as login model. So why we are using this create and login model? Because it makes the process of login view creation easy. And we can simply click add. Now we can see that under views, we have a folder by name login, and inside that login, we have a CSS.html file. This is the login view. Now let us see what we have here. In this view, as we can see, we have two fields. One is for username, and another one is for password. So in our case, for password, it is using edit for. If we use edit for, while user is typing password, the text will be displayed in the screen. But so because of that reason, as we want to show asterisk while the user is typing password, we can use HTML not password for. So when we apply this password for, whenever the user is typing, we will be able to see only, that means in the screen we'll see only passwords. Okay, and after that we can change the button text or button value as login, and we don't need this back to this one. We can delete that. Right. So this is how we have created login view. Simply we have to create a view by using login model as a model, and you will get a view like this. We don't need to create view on your own. Automatically framework creates all these things for us. So this makes the development fast. Step 5, enable forms authentication. Now let's go to web.config and enable forms authentication. So here in web.config under system.web, we have to use authentication. The main thing that we need to notice here is that authentication mode we have to specify as forms authentication. After that, we have to give the details related to the login URL. So here we want to use this action as the login URL. That means whenever user tries to log in, we want to invoke this action. This is present inside login controller. So how we can use this one as part of login URL is, we have to go to web.config and here we have to give login/login. That's it. So we have specified the login URL for this forms authentication. This is how we enable forms authentication, by making changes in configuration file. Now, so we have implemented login related controllers, modal and view, and we have enabled forms authentication, but we have not yet applied security, or we have not implemented security on any of the views. Step 6, use authorize attribute. So in order to apply or in order to implement security on views or on actions or on controllers, what we need to do is, for example, if we want to protect index from public audiences or public users, then for this index we have to apply authorize. That means whenever some user tries to access this index view, then he will be authorized. Means if he is not authorized, he will be redirected to login page. If the user is authorized, then he will be able to see the index view. So now let us execute and see how the application behaves. Remember, we have implemented or we have applied authorize only for index action. That means now the security is implemented only for index view. For other views like about and contact, we have not implemented security. So here, now let us click on contact. We are able to see contact without login. Let us click about. We are able to see about without login. And at the same time, let us try to access home. So as soon as we click home, you can observe that we are redirected to login page. Why? Because on index view, that means that is the default view for this home controller, right? So this home refers to that index view. Whenever you try to access that index view, since we have applied security to that view, user is expected to, means user is redirected to this login page. And again, if we click about, he is able to access this view. Why? Because there is no security on this view. So now let's go to application and apply security on the other views as well. So for that purpose, what we can do is that we can apply authorize attribute at controller level. We can delete from here and add here. So if we apply authorize at action level, that security will be applicable only to that action. If we apply at controller level, for all the actions available in that controller, this authorize is applicable. Now we are applying authorize attribute on home controller, means we are securing index, about, and contact, all these three views. So all these three views are secured now. Now let's execute the application and see how it is. Yeah. So if we click on home, it takes us to login page. If we click on about, still we are redirected to login page. And if we click on contact, then also we are redirected to login page. Why? Because on all these three views we have implemented security, right? So now let us enter some name, some username, some ABC, and password can be anything. And whenever you click login, now we can view contact page. Why? Because we were trying to access contact, we are redirected to login page, and there we have entered credentials and click submit. So then the user details are validated according to this login controller. Why? Because we have entered username and password. If there is some contact in that, we are considering that user as valid user and setting the authentication key. And we are redirecting user to the requested URL, which is contact in our case. Now this is how we have. And if you click about, you will be able to access about. We can access home also. This is how we can implement security in ASP.NET MVC. Now let us add logout feature as well. Step 7, logout implementation. In order to implement logout functionality, what we have to do is we need to go to layout, and as part of this layout we need to add logout related controls. So first we'll take a span, and we'll apply class equals to nav hyphen text, nav bar hyphen text. Yeah, this one. Inside this span, first if the user is authenticated, will show username and logout button. If the user is not authenticated, will show only login button. Let's do that. If user dot identity dot is authenticated, then we'll do this. Else let's keep if else, but so if the user is authenticated, the first thing that we need to do is we'll show welcome colon welcome colon, and after that we can show the user details at the rate user dot identity dot name and let us keep this one as part of P so that will show in boldface. So we are showing the user name in boldface, and after that we have to show logout button. For that we have to use HTML dot action link, which takes the first parameter, which is whatever name, whatever we want to show as part of link text. Will show logout, and next one is action name. So here we have to give the action name, logout action name from login controller. In our login controller, the logout action is, okay, we have taken like this. So we have to use the same logout, and controller name is login. That's it. We have implemented the authenticated user case. Now, if the user is not authenticated, we need to show logout button. So for that purpose, you can simply copy this, and sorry, if the user is not authenticated, we have to show login button, right? We have to use the login action. Login action, I hope the name is same. Yes, login action. Yes, so this is how we can implement logout feature in ASP.NET MVC. So if the user is authenticated, we are showing username and logout button. If the user is not authenticated, we are showing simply login button. Let us give the name as login. Right? Now let's execute the application and see how it behaves. Now we can see that we are presented with login page. If you try to access contact, we are in login page. As we have not logged in, this button is shown, login button. If you click here, then also we are in login button. If we click contact, then also we are in login button. On any click, on any home or about or contact click, we are in login button. That means whenever we try to access any view, as we have implemented security on all the views, it is asking us to enter credentials. Now let us enter some username and password and click login. Now we can see that we have logged in, and the logged in information can be seen here. I have given username as ABC. The same thing we are displaying here. Welcome ABC. And as we are authenticated, we are showing the logout link. So if we click logout, as we have logged out, it is showing us the login screen. Now let us log in again. Now we have again logged in, and we are able to access any views.